The pounding of hooves against hard, packed earth echoed through the valley as Hannah O'Sullivan raced her chestnut mare toward the distant silhouette of Santa Rosa. Her heart hammered against her ribs with the same desperate rhythm, tears streaking down her dust-covered cheeks as she fled the only home she'd ever known. Behind her lay shame, accusation, and the wreckage of her reputation, all for crimes her sister had committed. It was 1875, and Hannah's world had shattered in the span of a single day. "Faster, Penny," she urged the mare, leaning forward over the animal's straining neck. The California sunset painted the hills in gold and crimson, a beauty that seemed to mock Hannah's despair. Her fingers clutched the reins so tightly they ached, knuckles white with tension. 22 years old and running like a criminal when she was anything but. The mare's pace slowed as they approached the outskirts of Santa Rosa. The town had grown considerably since the railroad had come through 3 years prior, transforming from a sleepy settlement to a bustling center of commerce. Hannah had been here only twice before, always in the company of her father or sister. Now she arrived alone, unwelcome even in her own home. She guided Penny toward the modest hotel at the edge of town, hoping she had enough coins in her hastily packed satchel for a night's lodging. Tomorrow she would figure out what came next. For now, she needed to disappear. The stable boy took Penny's reins with a curious glance at Hannah's disheveled appearance, but she couldn't bring herself to care about the impression she made. Her blue calico dress was covered in dust, her dark hair falling from its pins after the hard ride. She secured her satchel over her shoulder and headed for the hotel entrance. "Room for one, please," she said quietly to the clerk, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose. He looked up with mild disinterest. "Name?" Hannah hesitated. Would news from Willowcreek have reached Santa Rosa already? "Hannah Smith," she lied, giving her mother's maiden name. "That'll be 50 cents for the night. We serve breakfast at 7. She counted out the coins from her small purse, wincing at how quickly her meager savings were disappearing. The room key felt heavy in her palm as she climbed the narrow staircase to the second floor. Room 6 was small but clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and window overlooking the main street. Hannah closed the door behind her and finally allowed herself to collapse onto the bed, the events of the day crashing over her like a wave. "You stole it. Everyone knows it was you, Mrs. Whitaker had screamed, her face contorted with fury as she stood in the O'Sullivan family parlor earlier that day. "I did no such thing," Hannah had protested, genuinely confused by the accusation. "My mother's broached the gold one with the pearls. It's been in our family for generations, and now it's gone. You were the only one in our home yesterday for the sewing circle." "I never," Hannah had started to say, but then she'd seen a flicker of something in her sister Charlotte's eyes. Charlotte, beautiful and wayward at 19, had been standing behind Mrs. Whitaker, her expression carefully neutral except for that momentary tell. "Charlotte?" Hannah had questioned quietly. But Charlotte had looked away, and their father, exhausted from raising 2 daughters alone since their mother's death 5 years earlier, had simply shaken his head in disappointment. "Hannah, if you took it, you need to return it. This isn't like you." "I didn't take anything." She'd protested, but by then more accusations had surfaced. A missing silver spoon from the Hendersons, cash from the donation box at church, small things that had been disappearing for weeks, all coinciding with Hannah's visits. Charlotte had said nothing to defend her sister, not one word. Now, lying on the hotel bed, Hannah pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes to stop the tears. Charlotte had always been the difficult one, impulsive, restless, forever seeking excitement beyond their small ranch. But Hannah had never imagined her sister would let her take the blame for theft. When Hannah had confronted her privately, Charlotte had finally confessed, tears in her eyes. "I need money to leave this place. You don't understand what it's like for me here. I'm suffocating." "Then tell the truth," Hannah had pleaded. Charlotte's pretty face had hardened. "I can't. Father would never forgive me. You're his favorite anyway. Everyone knows that. They'll forgive you eventually." And when Hannah had threatened to reveal the truth herself, Charlotte had dropped the final blow. "If you tell, I'll say you put me up to it, that we did it together. Who do you think they'll believe? Everyone already suspects you." The injustice of it had stolen Hannah's breath. Within hours, it seemed the entire community of Willowcreek had turned against her. Her father, looking older than his 50 years, had asked her to leave until things settled down. "Just for a little while," he'd said, not meeting her eyes. "Give people time to forget." Hannah had packed her things in a haze of disbelief, taking only what would fit in her saddlebags and the small satchel she now clutched to her chest. A few dresses, her mother's Bible, the pocket watch that had been her graduation gift, and nearly all the money she had saved from teaching at the schoolhouse for the past 2 years. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss, the hotel manager asked me to bring you some hot water," a female voice called. Hannah quickly wiped her tears and smoothed her hair before opening the door. A young maid stood there with a steaming pitcher. "Thank you," Hannah murmured, accepting it gratefully. "Supper's being served downstairs if you're hungry," the girl added before turning away. Hannah hadn't eaten since morning, but the thought of facing people in the dining room made her stomach twist. She would wait until morning. For now, she washed the dust from her face and hands, changed into her nightgown, and slipped between the sheets of the unfamiliar bed. Sleep came fitfully, punctuated by dreams of accusatory faces and her sister's betrayal. When dawn finally broke, Hannah rose feeling hardly rested at all. She dressed in her second-best dress, a modest navy blue with white trim, and pinned her dark hair into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. She would need to find work immediately. Her savings wouldn't last more than a week or two, even with the strictest economy. Perhaps the school in Santa Rosa needed an assistant teacher, or there might be work in one of the shops. The hotel dining room was nearly empty when Hannah descended for breakfast. She took a small table in the corner, ordering only coffee and toast to conserve her funds. As she sipped the strong brew, she unfolded a copy of the Santa Rosa Daily Democrat that someone had left behind. Her eyes caught on a small advertisement in the bottom corner of the page. "Assistant needed at O'Malley's General Store. Inquire within. References required." Hannah's heart sank at the last line. Who would provide a reference for her now? Still, she had her teaching certificate. Perhaps that would be enough. After finishing her modest breakfast, she gathered her courage and stepped out into the bustling morning streets of Santa Rosa. O'Malley's General Store was located on 4th Street, a large establishment with wide display windows showcasing everything from fabric bolts to farming tools. A bell chimed cheerfully as Hannah pushed open the door. The scents of coffee, leather, and spices mingled in the air. Several customers browsed the aisles, while a stout man with graying red hair arranged a display of canned goods. "Excuse me," Hannah said, approaching the counter where a middle-aged woman stood tallying figures in a ledger. "I saw your advertisement for an assistant." The woman looked up, assessing Hannah with shrewd eyes. "Yes, that position's still open. You have experience?" "I was a schoolteacher in Willowcreek for the past 2 years," Hannah explained. "I can keep accounts and I'm quick with figures." "Willowcreek." The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. "What brings you to Santa Rosa?" Hannah had prepared for this question. My father's health is declining. I needed a change. It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father's heart had been troubling him recently, but the guilt of the omission still stung. I'm Mrs. O'Malley, the woman said. My husband and I own the store. Do you have a letter of recommendation? Hannah hesitated. I left rather suddenly, but I can write to the school board for one, if you'd be willing to consider me in the meantime. Mrs. O'Malley's expression grew skeptical. We need someone reliable. Someone trustworthy with the till. The words hit Hannah like a physical blow. Would this be her new reality? Forever suspected, forever defending her character. I understand, she said quietly. Thank you for your time. She turned to leave, fighting back a fresh wave of despair, when the bell above the door jangled and a tall figure entered the store. Morning, Mrs. O'Malley, called a deep voice. Got that order of fence wire in yet? Just yesterday, Mr. James, the shopkeeper replied, her tone warming considerably. It's in the back. I'll have Frank bring it out to your wagon. Hannah kept her eyes lowered as she tried to slip past the newcomer, but in her haste, she collided with his solid form. Strong hands steadied her shoulders before she could stumble. Pardon me, madam, he said, and Hannah found herself looking up into the most startlingly blue eyes she'd ever seen. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face tanned from outdoor work. Dark blonde hair fell slightly over his forehead, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a strong jaw. He looked to be in his late 20s, dressed in the practical attire of a rancher, denim trousers, sturdy boots, and a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. Entirely my fault, Hannah murmured, stepping back from his grasp. Excuse me. But as she moved toward the door, Mrs. O'Malley called out, Miss O'Sullivan, wait. Hannah turned, surprised that the woman remembered her name when she'd only mentioned it once during their brief conversation. This is Ethan James, Mrs. O'Malley said. He owns the Double J Ranch just outside of town. Ethan, this young lady was just inquiring about the assistant position. Ethan James tipped his hat politely. Madam, Miss O'Sullivan was a teacher in Willowcreek, Mrs. O'Malley continued, but she's without references at present. Hannah's cheeks burned with humiliation. Why was the woman announcing her predicament to a stranger? Willowcreek. Ethan James raised an eyebrow. I was just there last week delivering horses to the Miller place. Small world. Hannah's stomach knotted with dread. Had news of her disgrace already spread? Would this man casually reveal her shame to Mrs. O'Malley? I should be going, Hannah said hastily. I have other inquiries to make. Wait, Ethan said, studying her face. You're not related to Thomas O'Sullivan, are you? Tall fellow, runs that homestead near Cypress Creek. Hannah nodded reluctantly. He's my father. Well, I'll be. He helped me with a lame horse last year when I was passing through. Good man. Fine horsewoman, his daughter, Charlotte, was it? Charlotte is my sister, Hannah clarified quietly. Ah, Ethan nodded. He mentioned having 2 daughters. You must be the older one, Hannah, right, the teacher? Yes. She couldn't fathom where this conversation was leading. Ethan turned to Mrs. O'Malley. I can vouch for Miss O'Sullivan's family. They're good people. Hannah stared at him in disbelief. Why would this stranger speak for her? Mrs. O'Malley seemed to consider this. Well, I suppose we could try you for a week, see how it goes. Pay is $8 a week. Hours are 8 to 6 with Sundays off. Hope fluttered in Hannah's chest. Thank you, Mrs. O'Malley. I won't disappoint you. You can start tomorrow morning, the woman said briskly, and find more permanent lodging than the hotel. Margaret at the boarding house on Pine Street takes respectable young ladies. I appreciate the recommendation, Hannah said, hardly believing her sudden change in fortune. As Mrs. O'Malley returned to her ledger, Hannah turned to Ethan James. Thank you, Mr. James. Your word on my family's behalf was most generous. He smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. Happy to help, Miss O'Sullivan. Your father did me a good turn once. Besides, I know what it's like to be new in town. His kindness, so unexpected after yesterday's cruelties, nearly brought tears to her eyes. She blinked them back resolutely. Still, I'm grateful. Good day, Mr. James. She stepped out into the morning sunshine, her prospects suddenly brighter than they had been minutes before. Behind her, she felt Ethan James watching her departure with curious eyes. Hannah found the boarding house without difficulty. Margaret Wilson was a widow in her 50s who rented rooms primarily to unmarried working women. The house was a tidy 2-story structure with a small front garden and a well-kept porch. Room and board is $5 a week, Mrs. Wilson explained as she showed Hannah a small but pleasant chamber on the second floor. That includes breakfast and supper. You'd share with one other girl, Miss Jenkins, who works at the milliner's. That would suit me perfectly, Hannah said, relieved that the arrangement would leave her $3 a week to save or send home. You'll need to pay 2 weeks in advance, Mrs. Wilson added, and I'll require references. Hannah's heart sank. Again, the matter of references. I've just secured a position at O'Malley's General Store, she offered. Would Mrs. O'Malley's approval suffice? Mrs. Wilson considered this. I suppose that would do. And why did you leave your previous situation? Hannah had rehearsed her answer carefully. Family difficulties required a change. I was teaching in Willowcreek. Willowcreek. The Wilsons there are distant cousins of my late husband. Do you know them? Yes, of course, Hannah said, her palms beginning to sweat. Mr. Wilson is on the town council. Such a small world, Mrs. Wilson remarked. I'll write to Sarah Wilson today. She'll be pleased to hear about a new boarder from their town. Hannah felt her newfound hope crumbling. How long before Mrs. Wilson received a reply detailing the scandal Hannah had fled? A week. 2 at most. Still, she needed a place to stay, and this was the most affordable option. She counted out $10 from her dwindling funds and handed it to Mrs. Wilson. I'll move in this afternoon if that's agreeable, she said. Of course. Supper is at 6 sharp. Hannah returned to the hotel, settled her bill, and gathered her few belongings. By mid-afternoon, she was installed in her new room at the boarding house, unpacking her clothes into half of a small wardrobe. The other half already contained the belongings of Miss Jenkins, who Hannah had yet to meet. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed, fighting the urge to give in to despair. Her situation was precarious at best. Once word arrived from Willowcreek, she would likely lose both her job and her lodging. She needed a plan. Perhaps she could save enough in the next 2 weeks to move on again San Francisco, perhaps, where no one would know her name. But the thought of starting over yet again, farther from home, made her heart ache. A knock at the door interrupted her gloomy thoughts. Hello. A young woman with curly auburn hair peeked in. You must be the new boarder. I'm Alice Jenkins. Hannah O'Sullivan, Hannah replied, rising to shake the girl's hand. I hope you don't mind sharing your room. Not at all. It gets lonely sometimes. Alice entered and sat on her own bed across from Hannah's. Mrs. Wilson says you're working at O'Malley's now. Starting tomorrow, Hannah confirmed. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm at Madame Beaumont's millinery just 2 doors down. We can walk to work together. Alice's friendly chatter was a balm to Hannah's wounded spirit. They talked easily as Hannah finished unpacking, with Alice filling her in on the boarding house routines and the other residents' 2 seamstresses, a nurse at the small hospital and a clerk at the bank. Where did you come from? Alice eventually asked, the question Hannah had been dreading. Willowcreek, Hannah answered truthfully. It's a small ranching community about 30 miles east. And your family, my father and sister, are still there. My mother passed 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Alice said sincerely. My parents are both gone too. That's why I came to Santa Rosa last year. My aunt in San Francisco sent for me, but I decided to stop here instead. I like the smaller town feel. Hannah nodded, grateful that Alice didn't press for more details about her departure from Willowcreek. Supper was a lively affair, with all 6 women gathering around Mrs. Wilson's large oak table. Hannah kept her answers vague when questions about her background arose, turning the conversation whenever possible to topics about Santa Rosa itself. "The town's growing fast," commented Miss Porter, the bank clerk. "They say the population's nearly doubled since the railroad came through." "Makes for good business," agreed Madame Beaumont, who despite her French-sounding name was actually from Ohio. "Especially with all the ranchers in the area. The James Place, the Patterson Ranch, and that big Spanish land grant property, what's it called? Rancho Cabeza de Santa Rosa," supplied Mrs. Wilson. "Though most of it's been sold off in parcels now. The Double J Ranch, that's Ethan James's place, was part of it originally." At the mention of Ethan James, Hannah looked up from her plate. "You know Mr. James?" asked Alice, noticing Hannah's reaction. "We met briefly today," Hannah admitted. "He was kind enough to speak well of my family to Mrs. O'Malley." "Ethan James is one of the finest men in the county," Mrs. Wilson declared. "Built that ranch up from almost nothing after his father died. Employs 6 men now, raises some of the best horses in Northern California." "And unmarried," added Madame Beaumont with a significant look at the younger women at the table. "Not for lack of interest from the ladies of Santa Rosa, mind you." The women laughed, and Hannah felt herself relaxing slightly for the first time since leaving home. These women seemed kind, and for tonight at least, she could pretend that her life hadn't been upended by her sister's betrayal. After supper, Hannah wrote a brief letter to her father, letting him know she had reached Santa Rosa safely and found both employment and lodging. She made no mention of Charlotte or the circumstances of her departure, focusing instead on practical matters. She wasn't certain when or if she would send it. The next morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect California spring day. Hannah dressed carefully in her best work dress, a practical brown cotton with white piping that her mother had sewn years ago. She pinned her dark hair into a neat bun and followed Alice down to breakfast. At precisely 7:30, she and Alice left the boarding house together, walking the short distance to 4th Street where their respective workplaces stood almost adjacent to one another. "Good luck today," Alice said cheerfully as they parted. "Come by the shop at lunchtime if you'd like. I bring a basket most days." Hannah thanked her and entered O'Malley's, determined to prove herself worthy of the chance she'd been given. Mrs. O'Malley was already behind the counter, tallying yesterday's receipts. She looked up as Hannah approached. "Good morning, Miss O'Sullivan." "Punctuality is a promising start. Have you worked in a store before?" "No, madam, but I'm a quick learner." Mrs. O'Malley nodded. "First rule, the customer is always right, even when they're not. Second rule, nothing leaves this store without being paid for. Third rule, we close the books every night, no exceptions." "Yes, madam," Hannah replied. "You'll start with inventory in the storeroom. Mr. O'Malley has the ledger ready for you." For the next several hours, Hannah worked diligently, counting crates of canned goods, measuring fabric bolts, and updating the store's inventory records. The work was straightforward but detail-oriented, not unlike preparing lessons for her students, in a way. At noon, she joined Alice for lunch, grateful for the young woman's continuing friendliness. They sat on a bench outside the millinery, sharing Alice's bread, cheese, and apples as they watched the town's activity. "How's your first day?" Alice asked. "Busy but good," Hannah replied. The O'Malleys seem fair employers. They are, Alice agreed. Mrs. O'Malley can be stern, but she's honest to a fault. As they ate, Hannah noticed a familiar wagon pulling up across the street. Ethan James climbed down from the driver's seat, exchanging greetings with several townspeople as he tied his horses to the hitching post. He seemed well-liked, acknowledging everyone from the elderly man sweeping the boardwalk to the young boys racing past with equal warmth. "He comes to town twice a week usually," Alice commented, following Hannah's gaze. "Tuesdays and Fridays for supplies and to check mail at the post office." "You seem well informed of Mr. James's schedule," Hannah noted with a small smile. Alice laughed. "Everyone knows everyone's business in Santa Rosa. That's small town life for you." The reminder sent a pang through Hannah's heart. How soon would her business become known here too? As if summoned by her thoughts, Ethan James looked up and spotted her. He tipped his hat in greeting and after a moment's hesitation crossed the street toward them. "Miss O'Sullivan," he said with a nod. "Settling in well, I trust?" "Yes, thank you, Mr. James," Hannah replied. "May I introduce Miss Alice Jenkins? Alice, this is Mr. Ethan James." "A pleasure, Miss Jenkins," Ethan said politely. "I believe I've seen you at Madame Beaumont's shop. My foreman's wife purchased a hat there recently." "Yes, I remember," Alice said, her cheeks slightly pink. "A blue bonnet with ribbon trim." "That sounds right," Ethan agreed with a smile. He turned back to Hannah. "I'm glad to see you found suitable lodging, Miss O'Sullivan. Mrs. Wilson runs a respectable establishment." "Indeed she does," Hannah confirmed, wondering at his continued interest in her welfare. "Well, I won't keep you ladies from your lunch," Ethan said. "Good day to you both." As he walked away, Alice nudged Hannah playfully. "He seems quite concerned about you for someone who only met you yesterday." "He merely feels responsible since he spoke for me to Mrs. O'Malley," Hannah explained, though she too found his attention curious. "If you say so," Alice replied with an unconvinced smile. Hannah returned to work, spending the afternoon helping customers and learning the store's organization system. By closing time, her feet ached from standing, but she felt a sense of accomplishment. Mrs. O'Malley's terse, "Not bad for a first day," felt like high praise. The week passed in similar fashion. Hannah quickly mastered her duties at the store, earning grudging approval from the O'Malleys. Her evenings at the boarding house were pleasant, filled with conversation and occasional card games with the other women. For brief periods, she could almost forget the circumstances that had brought her to Santa Rosa, but the fear remained. Each day she expected someone to arrive from Willowcreek with tales of her disgrace, or a letter to Mrs. Wilson revealing the scandal she'd fled. On Friday morning, just as Hannah was arranging a display of fabric remnants, the bell above the door chimed. She looked up to see Ethan James entering, his tall frame filling the doorway. "Good morning, Miss O'Sullivan," he greeted her. "Mrs. O'Malley about?" "She's in the back office with Mr. O'Malley," Hannah replied. "Can I help you with something?" "Just my usual order," he said, handing her a list. "Feed, flour, coffee, and such." Hannah nodded and began gathering the items, aware of Ethan watching her movements. "How are you finding Santa Rosa?" he asked casually. "It's a pleasant town," she answered, measuring coffee beans into a paper bag. "The people have been kind." "But not home," he observed shrewdly. Hannah paused, surprised by his perception. "No," she admitted quietly, "not home. May I ask why you left Willowcreek so suddenly?" His tone was gentle, without accusation, but Hannah stiffened nonetheless. "Family matters," she said shortly, returning to her task. "I see." He seemed about to say more when the door opened again, and Mrs. O'Malley emerged from the back room. "Mr. James, your usual order, is it?" Miss O'Sullivan is already seeing to it, he replied. Mrs. O'Malley nodded approvingly. She's a quick study, this one. Best assistant we've had in some time. Hannah felt a flush of pride at the unexpected praise. She finished gathering Ethan's supplies and calculated the total. That will be $4.75, Mr. James. He handed her a $5 gold piece. As she counted out his change, their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. Thank you, Miss O'Sullivan, he said, his blue eyes meeting hers for a moment longer than necessary. Frank can help load these into your wagon, Mrs. O'Malley offered, gesturing to her teenage son who had just entered from the storeroom. Much obliged, Ethan replied, but his gaze returned to Hannah. Miss O'Sullivan, I was wondering if you might be free for a walk on Sunday afternoon. The almond orchards north of town are in bloom, quite a sight if you haven't seen them. Hannah blinked in surprise. Was Ethan James asking to court her? She hardly knew the man, though she couldn't deny he was handsome and had shown her nothing but kindness. That is. She stammered, acutely aware of Mrs. O'Malley's interested presence. Just a neighborly gesture, Ethan added quickly, perhaps sensing her hesitation. I know what it's like to be new in town. Put that way, it seemed churlish to refuse. That would be nice, thank you, Hannah found herself saying. Excellent. Shall I call for you at the boarding house around 2 o'clock? Yes, that would be fine. Ethan tipped his hat and followed Frank outside with his purchases, leaving Hannah to face Mrs. O'Malley's knowing smile. Ethan James is a fine man, the older woman commented. His ranch is one of the most prosperous in the county. It's just a walk, Hannah said defensively, though her cheeks felt warm. Of course, Mrs. O'Malley agreed, but her expression remained smug as she returned to her office. That evening at the boarding house, news of Hannah's upcoming walk with Ethan James had somehow preceded her. Alice was practically bouncing with excitement when Hannah entered their shared room. Why didn't you tell me? She demanded playfully. Tell you what? Hannah asked, though she suspected she knew. That Ethan James invited you walking on Sunday. Mrs. Wilson heard it from Mrs. Peterson, who was in the store when he asked you. Hannah sighed, removing her hat and placing it carefully on the dresser. News travels fast in Santa Rosa. It's the most interesting thing to happen all week, Alice replied. Ethan James hasn't shown interest in any woman since Caroline Foster left town last year. Who was Caroline Foster? Hannah asked despite herself. Alice sat on her bed, eager to share the gossip. She was the banker's daughter. Everyone thought Ethan would propose, but then she announced she was moving to San Francisco to marry some lawyer she met while visiting relatives. Broke his heart, they say. It's just a walk, Alice, Hannah insisted. Mr. James is being neighborly to a newcomer. If you say so, Alice replied skeptically. But you'll need to wear your blue dress, it brings out your eyes. Despite her protests, Hannah found herself looking forward to Sunday afternoon. Life had offered her so little joy recently that even a simple walk seemed like a gift. Still, caution tempered her anticipation. She couldn't afford to form attachments in Santa Rosa when her position remained so uncertain. Sunday dawned clear and mild, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed to promise good things. Hannah attended church services with the other boarding house residents, uncomfortably aware of the curious glances directed her way. Clearly, word of her upcoming walk with Ethan James had spread beyond Alice and Mrs. Wilson. After the midday meal, Hannah changed into her blue dress as Alice had suggested and pinned her hair more carefully than usual. She was just fastening her mother's small silver locket around her neck when Alice rushed into the room. He's here, she announced. And Hannah, he brought his buggy, not just his horse. What difference does that make? Hannah asked, though the butterflies in her stomach suggested she already knew. A buggy means an outing, not just a walk around town, Alice explained as if to a child. It's much more intentional. You're reading too much into this, Hannah insisted, but she smoothed her skirts nervously as she headed downstairs. Ethan stood in the parlor, hat in hand, chatting easily with Mrs. Wilson. He wore a clean white shirt, dark vest, and what appeared to be new denims. When he turned and saw Hannah, a smile spread across his face. "Miss O'Sullivan," he said, his voice warm. "You look lovely." "Thank you, Mr. James," she replied, suddenly shy under his appreciative gaze. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, which she took after a moment's hesitation. Outside, a handsome buggy waited, pulled by a gleaming chestnut gelding. Ethan helped her up onto the seat with gentle hands at her waist, then climbed up beside her and took up the reins. "I hope you don't mind the buggy," he said as they set off. "The orchards are a few miles north, and I thought this would be more comfortable than walking." "Not at all," Hannah replied, conscious of his solid presence beside her. "It's a beautiful day for a drive." They made their way through town, Ethan exchanging greetings with various townspeople they passed. Hannah was aware of curious eyes following their progress, but for once, she didn't fear what those observers might be thinking or saying about her. Today, at least, their speculation would be benign. As they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with farms and stands of oak trees. Spring wildflowers carpeted the meadows in swathes of yellow and purple. "How long have you lived in Santa Rosa, Mr. James?" Hannah asked. "Call me Ethan, please," he replied. "I was born here, actually. My father established our ranch in '46, just before the war with Mexico. I've been running it myself since he passed on 8 years ago." "I'm sorry about your father," Hannah said sincerely. "Thank you." "It was hard at first. I was barely 20 when I inherited the ranch. Made plenty of mistakes those first few years." He smiled ruefully. "But we've done well since then. What about you? Have you always lived in Willowcreek?" Hannah nodded. "My parents moved there from Missouri when I was just a baby. My father built our house himself." "And your teaching, did you always want to be a teacher?" "Since I was a girl," Hannah confirmed. "I love children, and there's something wonderful about watching someone grasp a new idea for the first time." She found herself relaxing as they talked, sharing stories of her students and listening to Ethan's tales of ranch life. He spoke with obvious pride about his horses, particularly a line of quarter horses he was breeding for both ranch work and racing. "There," Ethan said suddenly, pointing ahead. "The almond orchards." Hannah caught her breath at the sight. Row upon row of almond trees stretched across the gentle slopes, their branches laden with delicate white blossoms. Against the blue California sky, they looked like clouds brought down to earth. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "I thought you might like to see it," Ethan said, clearly pleased by her reaction. "They only bloom for a few weeks each spring." He guided the buggy to a spot where they could look out over the orchard, then set the brake and helped Hannah down. They walked along the edge of the trees, the sweet fragrance of almond blossoms surrounding them. "May I ask you something, Hannah?" Ethan said after they had walked in comfortable silence for several minutes. "Of course," she replied, though a flutter of apprehension stirred in her chest. "Why did you really leave Willowcreek?" Hannah stopped walking, her heart suddenly pounding. "I told you, family matters. I don't mean to pry," Ethan interrupted gently. "But I received a letter from Jack Miller in Willowcreek yesterday. He mentioned some trouble involving the O'Sullivan family. Something about theft accusations." Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. Here it was the moment she had been dreading. She turned away, unable to bear seeing the judgment in his eyes. "I should go," she said tightly. "Please take me back to town." "Hannah, wait." His hand caught her arm, his touch gentle but firm. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'd just like to hear your side." "My side?" she laughed bitterly. "Does it matter? The good people of Willowcreek have already decided I'm guilty." "It matters to me," Ethan said quietly. Something in his voice made her look up at him. His blue eyes held no condemnation, only concern and something else she couldn't quite identify. "Why?" she asked. "Why should you care about a stranger's troubles?" "You're not quite a stranger anymore," he replied. "And I'd like to think I'm a decent judge of character. The woman I've come to know this past week doesn't strike me as a thief." His faith, so freely given, broke through the wall Hannah had built around her pain. Before she could stop them, tears filled her eyes and spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't take anything," she whispered. "It was Charlotte, my sister. She's been stealing small items for months, saving money to run away to San Francisco. But when people started to notice things missing, somehow the blame fell on me." "And your sister let that happen?" Ethan asked, his voice hardening slightly. Hannah nodded miserably. "She threatened to claim I put her up to it if I exposed her. I've always been the responsible one. No one would believe I wasn't involved somehow, even my father." Her voice broke. "He didn't exactly accuse me, but he didn't defend me either. He asked me to leave until things settled down." Ethan's expression had grown increasingly grim as she spoke. "That's unconscionable. Your own family turned against you. Charlotte has always been restless, impulsive. And my father, he's been exhausted since my mother died. I think it was easier for him to send me away than to face the possibility that Charlotte was the guilty one." "That doesn't excuse it," Ethan said firmly. Hannah wiped away her tears, embarrassed by her breakdown. "I'm sorry. You didn't invite me out to hear my troubles." "Don't apologize," he replied, pulling a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offering it to her. "I asked because I wanted to know." She accepted the handkerchief gratefully, drying her eyes. "What did Mr. Miller's letter say exactly?" Ethan hesitated. "That there had been some thefts in Willowcreek and that you'd left town under a cloud of suspicion. He warned me that you might not be trustworthy." Fresh pain lanced through her heart. "And yet you still ask me to accompany you today. Why?" "Because I've seen how you conduct yourself with dignity and hard work. Because Mrs. O'Malley, who trusts almost no one with her precious store, speaks highly of you after just a week. And because—" He paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "Because from the moment I saw you, I couldn't quite get you out of my thoughts." The simple honesty in his voice rendered Hannah speechless. No man had ever spoken to her so directly about his feelings. "You believe me?" she finally asked, the question that mattered most. "Yes," Ethan said without hesitation. "I believe you." Those 3 words, spoken with such certainty, loosed something in Hannah's chest, a knot of fear and shame that had been tightening since that terrible day in Willowcreek. For the first time, someone had heard her story and simply believed her. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood in silence for a moment, the scent of almond blossoms swirling around them. Then Ethan surprised her by gently taking her hand. "Hannah, I'd like to help you clear your name." "How?" she asked, not pulling her hand away. "It's my word against Charlotte's, and she's the one still there, able to tell her version of events daily." "There must be a way to prove the truth," Ethan insisted. "Were any of the stolen items recovered?" Hannah shook her head. "Not that I know of." "Charlotte was probably hiding them somewhere until she had enough money to leave." "Then perhaps we should look for them," Ethan suggested. "If we could find the items in her possession, no one could deny your innocence." "You do that?" Hannah asked incredulously. "Travel to Willowcreek and search for evidence to clear my name." "I would," he said simply. "No one should suffer for crimes they didn't commit, especially not someone like you." "Someone like me." "Someone honest," he clarified, though a faint flush colored his tan cheeks. someone who deserves better. Hannah felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the mild spring day. This near stranger was offering her more support than her own family had. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say you'll let me help you," Ethan replied. "I have business in Willowcreek next week anyway. I'm delivering horses to the Stewart place. I could speak with your father, perhaps look around for evidence." Hannah considered his offer. The thought of someone defending her, believing in her without question, was almost too precious to comprehend. But pride made her hesitate. "I don't want to be a burden," she said. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Ethan insisted, "and I'd like to know more if you'll permit it." The admission, offered with such straightforward sincerity, touched Hannah deeply. She had come to Santa Rosa expecting nothing but hardship and loneliness. Instead, she had found work, friendship, and now this unexpected champion. "All right," she agreed finally. "But be careful. Charlotte can be convincing when she wants to be." "I'll keep that in mind," Ethan promised. He still held her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "Now, shall we enjoy the rest of our afternoon? There's a small creek just beyond the orchard with a perfect spot for a picnic if you're amenable." "A picnic?" Hannah asked, surprised. Ethan smiled, the dimple appearing in his right cheek. "I might have packed some food, just in case our outing stretched into the afternoon." The gesture was so thoughtful that Hannah felt her eyes misting again, but this time with happiness rather than despair. "That sounds lovely," she managed. They returned to the buggy, where Ethan produced a basket containing bread, cheese, apples, and even a small bottle of lemonade. He spread a blanket under a large oak tree overlooking both the almond orchard and a bubbling creek beyond. As they ate, the conversation turned to lighter topics: books they had both read, places they hoped to visit someday, memories of childhood adventures. Hannah found herself laughing at Ethan's stories of his early attempts at horse training and sharing her own tales of schoolroom mishaps. "I never thought I'd be laughing today," she admitted as they packed up the remains of their picnic. "Thank you for that gift, Ethan." "Your laughter is the gift," he replied, his eyes warm on her face. "I hope to hear more of it in the future." The simple statement held a promise that made Hannah's heart beat faster. This man, this kind, decent man, seemed genuinely interested in her, scandal and all. It seemed too good to be true. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, they reluctantly returned to the buggy for the drive back to town. The journey seemed shorter somehow, filled with comfortable conversation and occasional companionable silences. When they reached the boarding house, Ethan helped Hannah down, holding her hand a moment longer than necessary. "I'll be leaving for Willowcreek on Wednesday," he said. "May I call on you tomorrow evening to discuss our strategy?" "Yes," Hannah agreed. "Though I'm not sure what strategy we could have beyond looking for the stolen items. We'll figure something out," Ethan assured her. "Until tomorrow, then." He raised her hand to his lips in a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly natural. "Thank you for a wonderful afternoon, Hannah." "Thank you for believing me," she replied softly. As she watched him drive away, Hannah felt a curious mixture of hope and apprehension. Ethan James was offering her a chance to reclaim her reputation and perhaps even her home. But what if he found no evidence? What if Charlotte convinced him, as she had convinced everyone in Willowcreek, that Hannah was somehow involved? These worries followed her into the boarding house, where Mrs. Wilson and the other ladies were clearly waiting for her return. Their curious glances and knowing smiles suggested they had been discussing her outing at length. "Did you enjoy the almond blossoms, dear?" Mrs. Wilson asked innocently. "They were beautiful," Hannah replied, unwilling to share the more significant aspects of her afternoon. "Mr. James is such a gentleman," commented Miss Porter. My father says his word is as good as gold at the bank. Hannah murmured agreement and excused herself to her room, where Alice was predictably waiting with barely contained excitement. "Tell me everything," her friend demanded the moment Hannah closed the door. Hannah sank onto her bed, suddenly exhausted by the emotional turbulence of the day. "It was a lovely afternoon," she said simply. "And," Alice prompted, "and he's coming to call again tomorrow evening." Alice squealed with delight. "I knew it. He's smitten with you, Hannah. Everyone's talking about it." "We've only just met," Hannah protested. "And there's more to it than that." Alice's expression sobered at Hannah's tone. "What do you mean?" Hannah hesitated. She hadn't shared her true circumstances with anyone in Santa Rosa, not even Alice. But if Ethan was going to Willowcreek, rumors would inevitably follow him back. Perhaps it was time to trust someone else with her story. Slowly, haltingly, she told Alice everything: Charlotte's thefts, the accusations, her father's request that she leave, and Ethan's offer to help clear her name. Alice listened without interruption, her eyes widening as the tale unfolded. When Hannah finished, she reached across the space between their beds and squeezed Hannah's hand. "How awful for you," she said with genuine sympathy. "To be blamed for someone else's crimes and by your own sister. I can't imagine. You believe me?" Hannah asked, echoing the question she had asked Ethan. "Of course I do." Alice looked affronted at the suggestion she might not. "I've shared a room with you for a week. You're the most honest person I know. You even insisted on paying Mrs. Wilson back when she gave you too much change for your board." Hannah felt tears threatening again at this second, unexpected affirmation. "Thank you," she whispered. "And now Ethan James is riding to your rescue," Alice added with a romantic sigh. "It's like something from a novel." "He's just being kind," Hannah insisted, though her heart fluttered at the memory of Ethan's gentle hand kiss. "Kind, handsome, wealthy, and unmarried," Alice enumerated with a grin. What more could a girl want? Despite her worries, Hannah found herself smiling at her friend's enthusiasm. "We'll see what happens when he returns from Willowcreek," she said cautiously. "For all we know, Charlotte may convince him I'm guilty after all." "Never," Alice declared with conviction. "Ethan James doesn't strike me as a man easily fooled." Hannah hoped her friend was right. The following evening, Hannah waited nervously in the boarding house parlor for Ethan's arrival. She had spent the day at O'Malley's, grateful for the distraction of work, though she hadn't missed Mrs. O'Malley's knowing glances whenever a customer mentioned Ethan's name. At precisely 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Wilson admitted Ethan with obvious approval of his punctuality. He entered the parlor with a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he presented to Hannah with a slight bow. "These reminded me of your eyes," he said quietly, for her ears alone. Hannah accepted the purple and blue blooms with a blush. "They're beautiful. Thank you." Mrs. Wilson provided a vase and then discreetly withdrew, though Hannah suspected the older woman was lingering within earshot in the adjacent dining room. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Ethan said once they were seated on the parlor sofa. "About how to approach the situation in Willowcreek." "And?" Hannah asked. "I believe a direct approach might be best. I'll speak with your father first, man to man. Then, if possible, I'd like to look around your family's property with permission, of course." "What exactly would you be looking for?" "The stolen items, primarily," Ethan replied. "But also any evidence of where Charlotte might have hidden them or what she planned to do with them." "You mentioned she wanted to go to San Francisco," Hannah nodded. "She's always dreamed of city life. Willowcreek is too small, too dull for her tastes." "Has she made any preparations for such a journey? Corresponded with anyone in San Francisco, perhaps?" "I don't know," Hannah admitted. "We weren't close in that way. Charlotte keeps her own counsel." I understand, Ethan said. Don't worry, we'll figure this out. His confidence bolstered Hannah's spirits. Thank you for doing this. You have no obligation to involve yourself in my troubles. Ethan's expression softened. I want to help you, Hannah, not out of obligation, but because. He paused, seemingly searching for the right words. Because I've come to care about what happens to you. The simple declaration warmed Hannah to her core. I'm beginning to care what happens to you as well, she admitted quietly. They shared a smile, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then Ethan cleared his throat and returned to practicalities. I should be back by Friday at the latest, he said. Will you be all right until then? Of course, Hannah assured him. I have my work and Alice's friendship. I'll manage. They spoke a while longer, discussing possible scenarios and what Hannah remembered about the stolen items. As the clock struck 8, Ethan reluctantly rose to leave. I have final preparations to make for tomorrow's journey, he explained. But I'll see you when I return with good news, I hope. At the door, he took her hand again, his expression serious. Whatever happens in Willowcreek, know that my belief in you won't change. Thank you, Hannah whispered, touched by his steadfast support. After he departed, Hannah returned to find Mrs. Wilson in the parlor, ostensibly dusting the mantelpiece. Such a fine young man, the older woman commented, abandoning any pretense that she hadn't been eavesdropping. So attentive. Yes, he is, Hannah agreed, unwilling to discuss the matter further. That night, as she prepared for bed, Hannah found herself both dreading and anticipating Ethan's trip to Willowcreek. What would he find there? Would her father welcome him or turn him away? And Charlotte, what would she say when confronted with someone who already doubted her version of events? The questions followed Hannah into her dreams, where she relived the moment of her banishment from home, only this time with Ethan standing beside her, his solid presence a bulwark against injustice. The next few days passed with agonizing slowness. Hannah threw herself into her work at the store, grateful for the distraction. Mrs. O'Malley had begun to trust her with more responsibilities, including helping customers select fabrics and managing the household accounts section of the store. On Thursday afternoon, as Hannah was arranging a display of sewing notions, the bell above the door jangled. She looked up with her practiced shopkeeper's smile, only to freeze in shock. Charlotte stood in the doorway, as pretty and composed as ever in a fashionable green traveling dress. Her blonde hair was arranged in the latest style, and her expression was one of practiced innocence, an expression Hannah knew all too well. "Hannah," Charlotte exclaimed, rushing forward as if to embrace her sister. "Thank goodness I found you." Hannah stepped back instinctively, avoiding her sister's outstretched arms. "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" Charlotte's face fell at the cold reception. "Looking for you, of course. Father has been so worried." The mention of their father twisted Hannah's heart. "Has he?" she asked skeptically. "Of course he has," Charlotte insisted. "We both have been. You left so suddenly with hardly a word." "As I recall, I was asked to leave," Hannah replied, keeping her voice low to avoid attracting Mrs. O'Malley's attention from the back room. Charlotte had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was a misunderstanding. Everything's been sorted out now." Hannah's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, sorted out?" Mrs. Whittaker found her brooch. It had fallen behind a dresser. "And the other things?" "Well, it seems there was never really any proof they were taken at all. Just people being careless with their possessions and looking for someone to blame." The brazen lie left Hannah momentarily speechless. Her sister had clearly not expected to find her in Santa Rosa, or she would have concocted a more convincing story. "Is that so?" Hannah finally managed. "How convenient." Charlotte's pretty face hardened slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means I know the truth, Charlotte." I know you took those things. Keep your voice down, Charlotte hissed, glancing around the empty store. Do you want everyone here to think you're a thief too? The threat was so familiar, so quintessentially Charlotte, that Hannah almost laughed. Why are you really here? Charlotte's expression shifted, her eyes suddenly filling with tears. I need your help, Hannah. I'm in trouble. Despite everything, Hannah felt a twinge of concern for her younger sister. What kind of trouble? I borrowed money, a significant amount, from Mr. Henderson. I told him I needed it for a new dress for the spring festival, but Charlotte bit her lip. I actually used it to buy a stagecoach ticket to San Francisco. I was going to leave next week. And, Hannah prompted, knowing there was more, and Mr. Henderson found out somehow. He's threatening to tell Father if I don't repay him immediately. I don't have the money, Hannah. I spent it all on the ticket and some new clothes. So you came to me? Hannah asked incredulously. After what you did? Charlotte had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't know where else to turn. Father would never forgive me for stealing and then lying about it. He's been so ill lately, the shock might. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Hannah felt torn between anger at her sister's manipulation and worry about her father. How ill is he? His heart's been troubling him more than usual, Charlotte admitted. The doctor visited twice last week. Concern for her father warred with suspicion of her sister's motives. And Mr. Henderson, how much does he claim you owe him? $20, Charlotte said in a small voice. It was a substantial sum, nearly 3 weeks of Hannah's wages at the store. I don't have that kind of money, Charlotte. I've only been working here a week. But you had savings from teaching, Charlotte pressed. I know you did. Most of which I used to travel here and secure lodging, Hannah pointed out. Why would I give you what little I have left after what you did to me? Charlotte's tears fell in earnest now. Because I'm your sister. Because I made a terrible mistake and I'm sorry for it. Because Father needs us both right now. Before Hannah could respond, the bell above the door jangled again. To her shock, Ethan James strode in, his expression grim and determined. He stopped short at the sight of Charlotte, his eyes narrowing. Miss O'Sullivan, he said formally, looking at Charlotte, I believe we have some matters to discuss. Charlotte looked confused, her gaze darting between Ethan and Hannah. I'm sorry, sir, but who are you? Ethan James, he replied coolly. I've just come from Willowcreek, where I had a most interesting conversation with your father. Hannah's heart raced. Ethan, you're back early. What happened? Ethan's face softened as he looked at her. I found what we were looking for, he said simply. Then, turning back to Charlotte with a harder expression, including a certain gold brooch with pearls that was supposedly found behind a dresser. The color drained from Charlotte's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Ethan countered. Because I have it right here. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew Mrs. Whittaker's brooch, holding it up so that it caught the afternoon light streaming through the store windows. Charlotte's eyes widened in panic. Where did you get that? From the hollow oak tree behind your father's barn, Ethan replied. Along with a silver spoon, 2 gold coins from the church donation box, and several other items reported missing in Willowcreek. All wrapped in a handkerchief with the initials CO embroidered in the corner. Hannah stared at her sister, who had gone completely pale. You kept them. After everything that happened, you didn't even get rid of the evidence. I was saving them, Charlotte whispered. For when I needed money in San Francisco, I never thought anyone would look there. No one would have, Ethan agreed, if your sister hadn't remembered your childhood hiding place. Hannah looked at him in confusion. But I never told you. You mentioned it yesterday evening, Ethan reminded her. When we were discussing places Charlotte might hide things, you said she'd always kept secrets in the hollow oak where you used to play as children. Hannah had forgotten that detail of their conversation. And you found it, with your father's help, Ethan confirmed. He was quite eager to assist once I explained my suspicions. Father helped you? Charlotte asked, her voice small. Ethan's expression held no sympathy. Your father is a man of integrity, Miss O'Sullivan. Once presented with evidence, he acted accordingly. What does that mean? Hannah asked. It means, Ethan said gently, that your father has disowned Charlotte until she makes full restitution for the items she stole and the damage she caused to your reputation. And it means he's asked me to bring you home, Hannah. The words "bring you home" rang in Hannah's ears like the sweetest music. Home. She could go home. Charlotte made a small, distressed sound. You had no right to interfere, she said to Ethan. This was a family matter. You made it my concern when you drove an innocent woman from her home, Ethan replied firmly. A woman I happen to care about deeply. His words, spoken with such conviction, caused Hannah's heart to swell with emotion. He turned to her, his expression softening. Your father is waiting for you, Hannah. He's deeply sorry for doubting you and eager to make amends. Hannah hardly knew how to process this sudden reversal of fortune. Just moments ago, she had been facing her sister's latest manipulation. Now her name was cleared and her home restored to her. What about Charlotte? She asked, looking at her sister's stricken face. That's between her and your father, Ethan said. Though I believe his conditions for reconciliation involve honest work and genuine remorse. Charlotte seemed to crumple before their eyes, her confident facade dissolving into genuine tears. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. I just wanted to escape Willowcreek. I never thought about how it would hurt you, Hannah. Despite everything, Hannah felt a flicker of compassion for her sister. Charlotte had always been restless, always seeking something beyond their quiet life. Her methods were wrong, her betrayal unforgivable, but Hannah understood the desperation that had driven her. You should go home, Charlotte, she said quietly. Face father and make things right. He won't even speak to me, Charlotte whispered. He will, Hannah assured her. He loves you, but you need to earn back his trust and mine. Mrs. O'Malley chose that moment to emerge from the back room, her expression curious at finding Ethan and a strange young woman in her store. Mr. James, you're back early from Willowcreek. I am, Ethan agreed. Mrs. O'Malley, may I speak with you privately for a moment? There's a matter concerning Miss O'Sullivan that requires your attention. As Ethan led Mrs. O'Malley back to her office, Hannah turned to her sister. You should take the afternoon stage back to Willowcreek. Start making amends. Charlotte wiped her tears, a flicker of her old defiance returning. And what will you do? Return in triumph with your cowboy hero? Hannah shook her head. I don't know yet, but whatever I decide, it will be my choice, not one forced on me by someone else's actions. Charlotte looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I am sorry, Hannah, truly. I know, Hannah replied. That's a start. When Ethan returned with Mrs. O'Malley, the shopkeeper's expression was a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. Miss O'Sullivan, Mr. James has explained everything. I must say, you've conducted yourself with remarkable dignity under the circumstances. Thank you, Mrs. O'Malley, Hannah said, touched by the praise. Of course, we'll be sorry to lose such a competent assistant, the older woman continued, but I understand you'll be wanting to return home now that your name has been cleared. Hannah hesitated. Would she return to Willowcreek? The thought of home pulled at her heart, but she had begun to build something in Santa Rosa, 2 friendships, respect, and perhaps something more if Ethan's attentions were any indication. I haven't decided yet, she admitted. Ethan looked surprised. I thought you'd be eager to return. I am, in many ways, Hannah said carefully. But I've found that Santa Rosa has its own appeal. Their eyes met, and understanding passed between them. Mrs. O'Malley cleared her throat. "Well, you have a position here as long as you want it," she declared. "Now, I believe your sister was just leaving." Charlotte stiffened at the dismissal but nodded. "The stage leaves at 4. I should go." Hannah walked her sister to the door. "Tell father I'll write to him tonight," she said. "And Charlotte, don't waste this chance to make things right." "I won't," Charlotte promised. She hesitated, then added, "He seems like a good man, your Mr. James." "He is," Hannah agreed, "though he's not my Mr. James." Charlotte gave her a knowing look. "Not yet, perhaps." With that, she stepped out into the afternoon sunlight and walked briskly toward the stage depot. When Hannah turned back, Ethan was watching her with a thoughtful expression. "You're really considering staying in Santa Rosa?" he asked. "I'm considering all my options," Hannah replied, "including the fact that my students in Willowcreek need a teacher and my father needs his daughter." "And what about what you need?" Ethan asked gently. The question took Hannah by surprise. For so long she had put others' needs before her own, her students, her father, even Charlotte. What did she want for herself? Before she could formulate an answer, Mrs. O'Malley interrupted. "Miss O'Sullivan, why don't you take the rest of the afternoon off? You've had quite a shock and the store isn't busy." "That's very kind, but no arguments," Mrs. O'Malley insisted. "Mr. James, perhaps you could escort Miss O'Sullivan back to her boarding house. She looks like she could use some fresh air." Ethan readily agreed, and moments later, Hannah found herself walking beside him down 4th Street. The afternoon was warm, the air fragrant with spring blossoms. "Tell me what happened in Willowcreek," Hannah said once they were away from the store. "How did my father react when you arrived?" Ethan smiled at the memory. "Suspiciously at first. He didn't take kindly to a stranger asking questions about his daughters. But when I mentioned your name and explained why I had come, something changed in his expression." "What do you mean?" "Guilt, I think," Ethan replied. "And hope. He invited me in and we talked for hours. He told me how worried he's been about you, how he regretted sending you away almost as soon as you'd gone. But pride kept him from sending for you immediately." "And Charlotte?" Hannah asked. "She wasn't there when I arrived." "Your father said she'd been acting strangely since you left, nervous, defensive. When I suggested searching the property for the missing items, he readily agreed." "He helped you search the hollow oak," Ethan nodded. "He was the one who insisted we look there. Said it was where you girls used to hide treasures as children. When we found the stolen items, Ethan paused, his expression softening. "He wept, Hannah. Said he'd failed you both, you by not believing in your innocence and Charlotte by not seeing what she was becoming." Tears pricked Hannah's eyes at the image of her strong, stoic father brought to tears. "What happened then?" "He asked me to find you, to tell you that you're welcome home anytime you're ready. And he asked me to bring Charlotte back as well, though under different terms. He left to speak with Mrs. Whitaker and the others who had accused you, to set the record straight. And Charlotte arrived here instead," Hannah mused. "She must have panicked when she realized what was happening." "I imagine so," Ethan agreed. "Though I'm surprised she came to you for help after what she did." "I'm not," Hannah said with a sad smile. "Charlotte has always known I'd help her if I could. She counted on that." They had reached the boarding house, but neither seemed inclined to end their conversation. By unspoken agreement, they sat on the front porch steps, watching as people passed by on the quiet street. "What will you do now?" Ethan asked after a companionable silence. Hannah considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure. Part of me wants to go home to see my father and return to teaching. But, Ethan prompted gently. "But I've started to build something here too," she admitted. "I enjoy working at the store, I've made friends, and—" she hesitated, gathering her courage. "And there are other reasons I might want to stay." Ethan's gaze was warm on her face. "Such as, you know very well," Hannah said, feeling her cheeks flush. He smiled, the dimple appearing in his right cheek. "I'd like to hear you say it." Hannah took a deep breath. "You, Ethan. You're one of the reasons I might want to stay in Santa Rosa." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Ethan reached for her hand, enfolding it in his larger one. "I've known you only a short time," he said quietly, "but I've never been more certain of anyone in my life. When I first saw you in O'Malley's store, something told me you were special. Everything I've learned about you since has only confirmed that feeling." Hannah's heart beat rapidly in her chest. "Even when you heard I might be a thief, I never believed that," Ethan said firmly. "Not for a moment. There's a goodness in you, Hannah, a light that shines through everything you do. I saw it immediately, and it only grows brighter the more I know you." "You speak as if you've made up your mind about me already," Hannah observed, both thrilled and frightened by the intensity in his blue eyes. "Perhaps I have," he admitted. "Is that too forward of me?" Hannah considered the question. 2 weeks ago she would have said yes without hesitation, but the events of recent days had taught her how quickly life could change for worse, but also for better. "No," she decided. "It's not too forward, just unexpected." Ethan smiled. "Life often is. Look at us. If Charlotte hadn't stolen those items, if you hadn't come to Santa Rosa, if I hadn't happened to be in O'Malley's that day. A series of unfortunate events leading to something rather fortunate," Hannah summarized with a small smile of her own. "Exactly." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Hannah, I don't want to rush you. You have decisions to make about your future, and I respect that. But I want you to know that if you choose to stay in Santa Rosa, or even if you decide to return to Willowcreek, my feelings won't change." "And what feelings are those?" Hannah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan met her gaze steadily. "I'm falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment I saw you." The declaration, so simply and honestly delivered, took Hannah's breath away. No man had ever spoken to her of love before. "Ethan, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just wanted you to know where I stand. Whatever you decide about going back to Willowcreek, I'll support you. And if your path leads elsewhere, well, I'd like to be part of that journey if you'll have me." Hannah felt tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness or fear this time, but of a joy so unexpected it almost hurt. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered. "I didn't think it was possible so quickly, but when you believed in me when no one else did, something changed." Ethan's face lit with a smile more brilliant than the California sunshine. "Then we'll figure out the rest together," he promised. "Willowcreek, Santa Rosa, it doesn't matter as long as we're facing it side by side." In that moment, on a boarding house porch in a town she'd known for barely 2 weeks, Hannah felt the last pieces of her broken world begin to mend. The path forward wasn't entirely clear yet, but for the first time since leaving home, the future held more promise than peril. 2 days later, Hannah sat beside Ethan in his buggy, traveling the familiar road to Willowcreek. After much discussion, they had decided to visit her father together, to make plans for her future with all options open. Mrs. O'Malley had reluctantly granted Hannah a few days' leave, extracting a promise that she would return to Santa Rosa, regardless of her ultimate decision. "You'll at least need to train your replacement if you decide to leave permanently," the shopkeeper had insisted. Alice had been more emotional, alternating between excitement about Hannah's burgeoning romance with Ethan and dismay at the possibility of losing her new friend. "You must write to me every week if you stay in Willowcreek," she had demanded, hugging Hannah fiercely. Now, as the rolling hills gave way to the familiar valley of her childhood, Hannah felt a complex mixture of emotions. joy at the prospect of seeing her father again, apprehension about confronting Charlotte, and underneath it all, a quiet certainty about the man beside her that grew stronger with each passing day. "Nervous?" Ethan asked, noticing her pensive expression. "A little," Hannah admitted. "I haven't seen my father since that day." "He's eager to see you," Ethan assured her. "When I left, he was already planning a special supper for your return. And Charlotte," Ethan's expression grew more serious. "She arrived home safely. Your father has her working at the Whitaker place as partial restitution. Mrs. Whitaker was surprisingly understanding once the truth came out. She always had a soft spot for Charlotte," Hannah said. "Most people do." "Their regard for you is higher," Ethan countered. "You should have heard how the townspeople spoke of you once they realized their mistake. The school board is practically begging for your return." The knowledge warmed Hannah's heart, though it complicated her decision. If she returned to teaching in Willowcreek, what would that mean for her relationship with Ethan? His ranch was in Santa Rosa, a considerable distance for courting. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan spoke again. "Whatever you decide, Hannah, we'll make it work. I'm not about to let something as trivial as 30 miles come between us." Hannah smiled at his determination. "It won't be easy." "The best things rarely are," he replied, returning her smile. They crested a final hill, and the O'Sullivan homestead came into view, the sturdy 2-story house her father had built, the barn where Hannah had learned to ride, the apple orchard her mother had planted. Home, in all its familiar beauty. As they approached, the front door opened and Thomas O'Sullivan stepped onto the porch. He looked older than Hannah remembered, his shoulders slightly stooped, his hair grayer at the temples. When he saw the buggy, he straightened, shading his eyes against the afternoon sun. Ethan brought the horse to a stop in the yard. Before he could come around to help her down, Hannah was already moving, half running toward the porch steps. Her father met her halfway, engulfing her in a fierce embrace that spoke more eloquently than words. "Hannah," he murmured, his voice rough with emotion. "My girl." "Father," she whispered, breathing in the familiar scent of pipe tobacco and saddle leather. He held her at arm's length, his weathered face etched with remorse. "Can you forgive an old fool for doubting you?" "There's nothing to forgive," Hannah insisted. "You were deceived, as was everyone." "I should have known better," he replied. "You've never given me a moment's worry your whole life. I should have trusted that." Over her father's shoulder, Hannah saw Charlotte emerge hesitantly from the house. Her sister looked different, somehow humbler, less perfectly composed in her simple work dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid. Hannah stepped back from her father's embrace, turning to face her sister. For a long moment, they regarded each other in silence. "Hannah," Charlotte finally said, her voice small. "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough," but Hannah closed the distance between them and, to Charlotte's evident surprise, pulled her into a hug. "We'll work on making it enough," she said quietly. Charlotte's arms came around her hesitantly, then tightened as she began to cry. "I've been so terrible," she sobbed. "To you, to Father, to everyone." "Yes, you have," Hannah agreed, not unkindly. "But you're making amends now. That counts for something." As the sisters embraced, Ethan approached Thomas O'Sullivan, shaking the older man's hand warmly. "As promised, sir, I've brought her home." "And I'm in your debt for it," Thomas replied. "Please come inside. Supper's nearly ready and we have much to discuss." The meal that followed was one of the strangest and most wonderful of Hannah's life. Her father had indeed prepared a feast: roast chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden, and apple pie for dessert. Charlotte served the food with unusual humility, her usual sharp tongue notably absent. As they ate, Thomas and Ethan discussed ranch matters, finding common ground in their shared knowledge of horses and cattle. Hannah observed their easy rapport with growing certainty that whatever decision she made about her future, these two important men in her life would get along well. After the dishes were cleared by Charlotte, without complaint Thomas invited them to the parlor. Once they were settled, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hannah, the school board met yesterday. They've formally requested that you return to teaching as soon as possible. With a substantial increase in salary, I might add." Hannah nodded thoughtfully. "That's generous of them." "You were always the best teacher this town has had," her father said proudly. "They know it, especially now." "And what about Charlotte?" Hannah asked, looking at her sister who sat quietly in the corner. "Charlotte will continue working for Mrs. Whittaker through the summer," Thomas replied firmly. "After that, if she's proven herself trustworthy, we'll discuss other possibilities." Charlotte nodded acceptance of these terms, her expression subdued but not resentful. "And you're welcome home, of course," Thomas continued, turning back to Hannah. "Your room is just as you left it, but—" He glanced at Ethan. "I understand you've established yourself in Santa Rosa now." "I have," Hannah confirmed. "I have employment, lodging, friends." "And more than friends, perhaps," her father suggested, his gaze shifting meaningfully between Hannah and Ethan. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "Father—" "Mr. O'Sullivan," Ethan interjected, sitting forward in his chair. "I should be clear about my intentions regarding your daughter." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Should you now?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied firmly. "I've come to care deeply for Hannah in the short time I've known her. I believe we could build a wonderful life together in time." "In time," Thomas repeated. "That sounds sensible. And where would this life be built?" "Santa Rosa, I presume, where your ranch is located." "Ultimately, yes," Ethan admitted. "But I understand Hannah has ties here to you, to her students, to the community." "I would never ask her to choose between her family and me." Thomas studied the younger man thoughtfully. "And what solution do you propose?" Ethan looked at Hannah, his expression open and honest. "That's for Hannah to decide. I'll support whatever arrangement makes her happy." Hannah felt a surge of affection for this man who consistently put her needs and feelings first. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "The school term ends in 6 weeks. I could return to teaching until then, fulfilling my obligation to the children and the school board. And after that?" her father asked. Hannah took a deep breath. "After that, I'd like to consider a future in Santa Rosa." The words hung in the air, their significance clear to everyone in the room. Thomas nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I always knew I'd lose you to someone worthy eventually," he said. "Though I didn't expect it would also mean losing you to another town." "You're not losing me, Father," Hannah assured him. "Santa Rosa is only 30 miles away. We'll visit often." "We?" Thomas raised an eyebrow. Hannah blushed, realizing her presumption. She meant we," Ethan confirmed, reaching over to take Hannah's hand in his. "If Hannah chooses to make her life in Santa Rosa, I hope it will be as my wife, with your blessing, sir." Thomas's expression softened. "You have it, young man. Anyone who'd travel 30 miles to clear my daughter's name, then another 30 to bring her home to me, has already proven his worth." Charlotte, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke. "Does this mean you're engaged?" Hannah looked at Ethan, her heart racing. "Not yet," she said carefully. "We're still getting to know each other." "But soon," Ethan added, his blue eyes holding a promise that made Hannah's breath catch. "If Hannah will have me." "She will," Charlotte declared with unexpected conviction. "She'd be a fool not to." Hannah laughed, surprised by her sister's endorsement. "Thank you for that vote of confidence, Charlotte." As the evening continued, plans took shape. Hannah would return to her teaching position the following Monday, completing the school term through June. She would live at home. rebuilding her relationship with her father and sister. Ethan would travel to Willowcreek every weekend, dividing his time between courting Hannah and learning from Thomas O'Sullivan, whose knowledge of horses was considerable. At summer's end, they would reassess their future together. The unspoken understanding was that by then, Ethan would likely have formally proposed, and Hannah would likely have accepted. When it came time for bed, Hannah lingered in the parlor with Ethan after her father and Charlotte had retired. "Are you happy with our plan?" Ethan asked, holding both her hands in his. "Very," Hannah assured him. "It gives us time to be certain while still moving forward." "I'm already certain," Ethan admitted, "but I understand your need for prudence." Hannah smiled at his impatience. 6 weeks isn't so very long. "It's an eternity," he countered, raising her hand to his lips. "But you're worth waiting for, Hannah O'Sullivan." The following Monday, Hannah stood before her classroom of 20 children, ranging in age from 6 to 16, and felt a profound sense of rightness. Teaching had always been her calling, and the eager faces before her confirmed that she'd made the correct decision to return, at least until term's end. "Welcome back, Miss O'Sullivan," they chorused as she entered. Someone had written, "We missed you," on the blackboard, and several of the girls had placed wildflower bouquets on her desk. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched by their welcome. "I missed you all as well." As she moved through the familiar rhythms of the school day, reading lessons for the younger children, algebra for the older ones, history and geography for all, Hannah found herself contemplating the changes ahead. Her time in Santa Rosa had shown her that she could build a new life somewhere else, that her skills were valuable beyond Willowcreek. But it had also reinforced how much she loved teaching. That evening, as she sat on the porch with her father, watching the sunset paint the hills in gold and crimson, she broached the subject. "Father, if I move to Santa Rosa, I'd like to continue teaching somehow." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "I expected as much. It's in your blood, just like your mother. She taught school too before we married." "I know. She's the reason I became a teacher." Hannah hesitated. "Do you think Ethan would understand that I wouldn't want to just be a rancher's wife?" Her father chuckled. "That young man would understand if you wanted to fly to the moon, Hannah. He looks at you the way I looked at your mother, like you've hung the stars in the sky." Hannah smiled at the comparison. "I care deeply for him too." "I know you do," Thomas replied. "And for what it's worth, I think you'd make a fine match. He's solid, that one. Trustworthy." "He believed me when no one else did," Hannah said softly. "That means more than I can express." Thomas's face grew somber. "I'll regret doubting you until my dying day, Hannah." "A father should always believe the best of his children." "You do now," Hannah assured him. "That's what matters." From inside the house came the sound of Charlotte singing as she washed the supper dishes, a small domestic task that would have been beneath her notice a few weeks ago. Her sister was changing, slowly but perceptibly, finding a measure of contentment in the simpler life she had once scorned. "Your sister seems to be finding her way," Thomas observed, following Hannah's gaze toward the house. "I think she is," Hannah agreed. "Mrs. Whitaker told me Charlotte has been a tremendous help with her new baby. She has a gentle touch with the little one." "She needs purpose," Thomas said. "We all do. Charlotte just took a more roundabout path to discovering hers." The weeks that followed settled into a pleasant rhythm. Monday through Friday, Hannah taught her students with renewed passion, aware that these might be her last days as their teacher. Evenings were spent with her father and Charlotte, rebuilding the family bonds that had been strained by recent events. Weekends were devoted to Ethan, who arrived faithfully every Saturday morning and departed reluctantly each Sunday evening. They rode across the countryside together, attended church services, and shared countless conversations about their hopes and dreams. With each visit, Hannah's feelings for him deepened from initial attraction to genuine love. His steadfast character, his gentle humor, his unwavering support of her ambitions all combined to convince her that she had found a truly exceptional man. On the final Saturday in June, the last weekend before the school term ended, Ethan arrived earlier than usual. Hannah was still helping Charlotte hang laundry when his buggy appeared on the horizon. "He's early," Charlotte observed with a knowing smile. "And dressed in his Sunday best, I see." Hannah's heart quickened as she shaded her eyes to look. Indeed, even from a distance, she could tell that Ethan wore his best suit rather than his usual casual attire. "Today might be the day," Charlotte continued, her expression unexpectedly soft. "Are you ready?" "Yes," Hannah replied without hesitation. "I am." Charlotte squeezed her arm affectionately. "I'll finish the laundry. You go make yourself pretty for your beau." Hannah hurried inside to change from her work dress into something more suitable for whatever Ethan had planned. She chose her best dress, the blue one that Alice had insisted brought out her eyes, and arranged her dark hair in a becoming style with loose curls framing her face. When she descended the stairs, her father was in the parlor with Ethan. The two men engaged in serious conversation that ceased abruptly at her appearance. "Hannah," Ethan said, rising to his feet with obvious admiration in his gaze, "you look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, noting the unusual formality of his manner. "You're early today." "I was hoping you might join me for a picnic by the creek," Ethan explained. "It's such a fine day." "I'd love to," Hannah agreed, exchanging a knowing glance with her father, whose eyes twinkled with suppressed excitement. Thomas rose from his chair. "You young people enjoy yourselves. No rush to return supper will keep." Ethan helped Hannah into the buggy with careful hands, then took up the reins with what she recognized as nervous energy. As they drove toward the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the O'Sullivan property, Hannah noticed a wicker basket in the back of the buggy. "You came prepared," she observed. "Always," Ethan replied with a smile that didn't quite hide his tension. The spot he chose for their picnic was perfect, a grassy bank overlooking the clear, running water, shaded by a massive oak tree that might have been the twin of the one where Charlotte had hidden her stolen treasures. June wildflowers dotted the meadow beyond with splashes of color. Ethan spread a blanket and arranged their meal with meticulous care: fried chicken, fresh bread, strawberries, and even a bottle of lemonade. As they ate, his usual easy conversation was replaced by distracted responses and long pauses. "Ethan," Hannah finally said, setting aside her napkin. "Is something troubling you?" He looked at her, his blue eyes intense. "Not troubling, no, but important, very important." Hannah's pulse quickened. "I'm listening." Ethan set his plate aside and took her hands in his. "Hannah, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Every moment with you confirms what I knew almost from the first, that you are the woman I want to spend my life with." Hannah's breath caught in her throat as Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I had this made in San Francisco," he said, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small diamond flanked by sapphires. "The sapphires reminded me of your eyes." Tears of joy blurred Hannah's vision as Ethan slid from the blanket to one knee before her. "Hannah O'Sullivan, you are the most remarkable woman I've ever known. Your strength, your kindness, your unwavering integrity, they humble me. I love you with all my heart, and I promise to spend the rest of my days ensuring you never regret choosing me. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Hannah's heart felt too full for her chest, overflowing with a happiness she had never imagined possible. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. Yes, Ethan, I will marry you. His face lit with such joy that Hannah felt breathless. He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, then gathered her into his arms with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the kind of husband he would be. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise sealed beneath the oak tree beside the creek where Hannah had played as a child. When they finally drew apart, both were smiling so widely their cheeks ached. I spoke with your father this morning, Ethan confessed. Asked for his blessing. He gave it immediately, said he'd never seen you happier than you've been these past weeks. He's right, Hannah confirmed. I never imagined finding this kind of happiness, especially after your sister's betrayal, Ethan finished when she trailed off. It's strange how life works, isn't it? If Charlotte hadn't done what she did, you might never have come to Santa Rosa. We might never have met. I prefer to think we would have found each other somehow, Hannah said. That some things are meant to be. Ethan's smile was tender as he tucked a stray curl behind her ear. I like that thought. They lingered by the creek for hours, discussing their future with the excited anticipation of new lovers. Hannah would finish the school term the following Friday. After that, they would announce their engagement formally, with plans for an August wedding. I've been thinking about your wish to continue teaching, Ethan said as they finally packed up their picnic. The school in Santa Rosa is growing rapidly with all the new families moving to town. They'll likely need another teacher by fall. Hannah's heart warmed at his thoughtfulness. You've been inquiring on my behalf, just casually, Ethan assured her. I mentioned to the school board chairman that my future wife is an accomplished teacher. He seemed quite interested. Your future wife, Hannah repeated, savoring the words. That sounds wonderful. The news of their engagement was greeted with genuine joy by Thomas O'Sullivan, and, somewhat to Hannah's surprise, equal enthusiasm from Charlotte. I'm truly happy for you, Hannah, her sister said that night as they sat on the porch swing together. You deserve every happiness. Thank you, Hannah replied, studying her sister's face in the lamplight. What about you, Charlotte? What will you do after your time with Mrs. Whittaker ends? Charlotte shrugged. I'm not sure yet, but I'm not in a hurry to leave anymore. Mrs. Whittaker has offered to teach me proper bookkeeping. She says I have a head for figures, and little James is the sweetest baby. Hannah noted the softening of Charlotte's expression when she mentioned the Whittaker infant. You like caring for him, don't you? I do, Charlotte admitted. It's strange, I never thought I'd have patience for children, but there's something so pure about them, so honest. James doesn't care about my mistakes. He just wants to be loved. Everyone does, Hannah said gently. Charlotte nodded, her expression thoughtful. I'm learning that, slowly. On Hannah's final day of teaching, her students presented her with a handmade quilt, each square stitched by a different child or family. The school board formally thanked her for her service and presented a letter of recommendation that praised her teaching abilities in the highest terms. In case you wish to continue your vocation in Santa Rosa, the board chairman explained. As Hannah locked the schoolhouse door for the last time, she felt a bittersweet pang. She had loved teaching here, loved watching these children grow and learn. But ahead lay a new life, with new children to teach and a new family to build with Ethan. The following week was a whirlwind of preparations. Hannah and Ethan formally announced their engagement at church on Sunday, receiving congratulations from the entire community of Willowcreek. Even Mrs. Whittaker, who had been among the first to accuse Hannah of theft, approached with sincere apologies and good wishes. I judged too hastily, the older woman admitted. I hope you can forgive an old woman's mistake. Of course, Hannah replied, genuinely touched by the apology. We all make mistakes, some more consequential than others, Mrs. Whittaker observed ruefully. But your sister is making amends beautifully. She has a real gift with little James. Ethan's ranch foreman arrived midweek with a wagon for Hannah's belongings. Though she would stay in Willowcreek until the wedding, they had decided her furniture and larger possessions should be moved to Santa Rosa beforehand. "The house is ready for you whenever you are," Ethan told her as they supervised the loading of her wardrobe and desk. "Though I hope you'll want to make changes to suit your taste." "I'm sure it's perfect already," Hannah assured him, though in truth she had yet to see Ethan's home. That visit was planned for the following week, when she would travel to Santa Rosa with her father and Charlotte to begin final wedding preparations. The house, when Hannah finally saw it, exceeded her expectations. Set on a gentle rise overlooking the ranch, it was larger and more elegant than she had imagined. 2 stories of whitewashed clapboard with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. Roses climbed trellises along the front, and tall oaks provided dappled shade in the yard. "It's beautiful," Hannah breathed as Ethan helped her down from the buggy. "You built all this yourself?" "My father started it," Ethan explained. "I've expanded it over the years. The east wing is the newest addition, added it last year with thoughts of a family someday." He gave her a meaningful look that made Hannah blush. They had spoken of children, both agreeing they wanted a large family. The thought of filling this house with the laughter of their children filled Hannah with quiet joy. Inside, the house was tastefully furnished but clearly needed a woman's touch. Ethan showed her through the spacious rooms with obvious pride, pointing out special features and asking her opinion on potential changes. "This would be your study," he said, opening the door to a sunny room overlooking the garden. "I thought you might use it for preparing lessons if you continue teaching, or for whatever else you might wish." Hannah stepped into the room, noting the empty bookshelves waiting to be filled with her collection. The large desk positioned to catch the morning light, the comfortable reading chair by the window. That Ethan had set aside this space specifically for her pursuits spoke volumes about the kind of partnership he envisioned. "It's perfect," she told him, blinking back emotional tears. "Absolutely perfect." Thomas and Charlotte, who had been exploring the rest of the house, joined them in the study. "You've done well for yourself, James," Thomas commented, appraising the solid construction and quality furnishings. "A man could be proud of such a place." "Thank you, sir," Ethan replied. "I hope it will be a worthy home for your daughter." "It's the man, not the house, that matters," Thomas said gruffly. "But yes, I believe Hannah will be happy here." Charlotte wandered to the window, looking out over the expanse of the ranch. "It's different from Willowcreek," she observed. "Bigger, more established." "Santa Rosa is growing rapidly," Ethan confirmed. "The railroad has changed everything. There are opportunities here that didn't exist even 5 years ago." Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that." Later, as they toured the grounds, Hannah noticed her sister paying close attention to everything Ethan explained about the ranch operations. Charlotte asked intelligent questions about the horse breeding program and the economics of the cattle business, subjects she had never shown interest in at home. "Your sister seems to be developing new interests," Ethan commented that evening as he walked Hannah around the garden after supper. "I've noticed," Hannah agreed. "Mrs. Whitaker has been teaching her bookkeeping and she's taken to it readily. She always was quick with figures." "The ranch could use someone with those skills," Ethan said casually. "My foreman, Matthews, handles the books now, but he'd rather be working with the horses." Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Are you suggesting Charlotte might work here, at the ranch, if she's interested, and if she continues to demonstrate responsibility?" Ethan qualified. "It would have to be earned, not given, but it might be a fresh start for her away from the gossip in Willowcreek." Hannah was touched by his thoughtfulness. You do that for her. After what she did, I'd do it for you, Ethan corrected gently, because I know you love her despite everything. And perhaps for her too, everyone deserves a chance to rebuild their life after a mistake. Hannah's heart swelled with love for this man, who continued to surprise her with his generosity of spirit. I'll speak with her about it, she promised, but only if you're certain. I am, Ethan assured her. Family is important to me, Hannah. Your family will be my family too. The following month passed in a blur of wedding preparations. Hannah divided her time between Willowcreek and Santa Rosa, finalizing details and gradually moving her possessions to what would soon be her new home. Alice and the other women from the boarding house insisted on hosting a bridal shower, presenting Hannah with linens, kitchen items, and hand-embroidered handkerchiefs. Mrs. O'Malley contributed a fine set of china, declaring it a long-overdue bonus for Hannah's service at the store. In Willowcreek, the women of the community rallied to assist with the wedding dress, a creation of ivory silk with delicate lace trim that had once adorned Hannah's mother's gown. Even Mrs. Whittaker contributed, offering her best pearls as something borrowed for the bride to wear. Charlotte threw herself into the wedding preparations with unexpected enthusiasm, addressing invitations in her elegant handwriting and helping Hannah choose flowers and decorations. The sisters spent more time together in those weeks than they had in years, rebuilding their relationship one conversation at a time. I've been thinking about Mr. James's offer, Charlotte said one evening as they sat in Hannah's bedroom, sorting through keepsakes she would take to her new home. About working at the ranch, and, Hannah prompted. I think I'd like to try, Charlotte admitted, if you're comfortable with me being so near to your new life. Of course I am, Hannah assured her. You're my sister, Charlotte. I want you in my life. Charlotte looked down at her hands. Even after what I did, especially after what I did, Hannah corrected gently. We've both learned and grown from it. That's what matters now. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Perhaps not, Hannah agreed, but you have it anyway. That's what family means. The sisters embraced, the last lingering tension between them finally dissolving in mutual forgiveness. The wedding day dawned clear and mild, a perfect Saturday in mid-August. The ceremony was to be held in the garden of Ethan's ranch, now Hannah's home too, with a reception to follow on the sprawling lawn. In an upstairs bedroom, Hannah stood before the mirror as Charlotte and Alice fussed with her veil. Her ivory gown caught the morning light, the silk shimmering as she turned to inspect the final effect. You look beautiful, her father said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. Like your mother on our wedding day. Hannah smiled at him through the mirror. I wish she could be here. She is, in a way, Thomas said, crossing to stand beside her. In your smile and your kind heart. She would be so proud of the woman you've become, Hannah. Downstairs, guests were arriving, a mixture of Willowcreek neighbors who had traveled for the occasion, and Santa Rosa townspeople eager to welcome the new Mrs. James. The garden had been transformed with ribbons and flowers, chairs arranged in neat rows facing an arbor where Ethan would soon await his bride. At precisely noon, Hannah descended the stairs on her father's arm. Charlotte and Alice preceded her down the garden path, scattering rose petals as they walked. At the arbor, Ethan stood tall and handsome in his new suit, his face lighting with wonder as he caught sight of his bride. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, the couple exchanging vows they had written themselves. Hannah promised to support Ethan's dreams as he had supported hers, to build a home filled with love and laughter, to face life's challenges by his side. Ethan vowed to cherish Hannah's independence and spirit, to be her most steadfast ally, to love her through all the seasons of their life together. As they sealed their promises with a kiss, applause erupted from the assembled guests. Hannah looked out at the sea of faces, her father beaming with pride, Charlotte dabbing at tears, Alice practically bouncing with excitement, Mrs. O'Malley nodding approval, and dozens more from both Willowcreek and Santa Rosa. Two communities, once separate in her life, now united in celebration of her happiness. The reception lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing under lanterns strung through the oak trees. Hannah danced first with her new husband, then with her father, and finally with an endless stream of well-wishers. As twilight deepened, Ethan found her by the punch bowl, slipping an arm around her waist with the easy familiarity of a man who knew he had the right. "Happy, Mrs. James," he murmured near her ear. "Incredibly so," Hannah replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I'm beginning to think our guests may never leave." Ethan chuckled, the sound vibrating pleasantly against her side. "They will eventually, and then I'll have you all to myself." The promise in his voice sent a delicious shiver through Hannah. They had waited for this day with proper decorum, but both were eager for the privacy that marriage would finally afford them. As if reading their thoughts, Thomas O'Sullivan approached with Charlotte beside him. "I believe it's time we let these newlyweds enjoy their first evening as husband and wife," he announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "The rest of us can continue the celebration in town." With good-natured laughter and a few suggestive comments that made Hannah blush, the guests began to depart. Thomas kissed his daughter's cheek and shook Ethan's hand firmly. "Be happy, both of you," he said gruffly. "That's all a father wants for his children." "We will be," Ethan promised, his arm tightening around Hannah's waist. Charlotte embraced her sister with genuine warmth. "I'll see you in 2 weeks," she whispered. "After your honeymoon." Hannah nodded. Charlotte would be moving to Santa Rosa then, taking up residence in a small cabin on the ranch property and beginning her new position as the ranch's bookkeeper. Another fresh start for both sisters, this time built on truth and mutual respect rather than deception. As the last guests departed, Ethan swept Hannah into his arms, carrying her across the threshold of their home in traditional fashion. Inside, the house was quiet and welcoming, candles lighting their way up the stairs to the master bedroom that would now be theirs together. Later, as they lay entwined in the peaceful darkness, Hannah marveled at the journey that had brought her here. 3 months ago, she had fled Willowcreek in disgrace, her heart broken by her sister's betrayal and her father's doubt. Now she was married to a man who had never doubted her, her family relationships were healing, and a future full of promise stretched before her. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle in the darkness. "How strange life is," Hannah replied. "How the worst day of my life ultimately led me to the best." Ethan's arms tightened around her. "I thank God every day that you walked into O'Malley's store that morning, even though you thought I might be a thief," Hannah teased. "I never thought that," Ethan insisted. "Not for a moment. Some things you just know in your heart." Hannah nestled closer to her husband, believing him completely. He had seen her truth clearly from the beginning, had believed in her when faith was what she needed most. That certainty, that unwavering trust, had been the foundation of their love story, a love that would continue to grow through all the chapters of their lives together. 5 years later, Hannah stood on the veranda of their home, watching as Ethan taught their 3-year-old son Thomas to ride his first pony. Their daughter Sarah, just a year old, babbled happily in Hannah's arms, reaching out toward her father and brother with chubby hands. The ranch had prospered under Ethan's careful management, expanding to include new pastures and a larger herd of both cattle and horses. Hannah divided her time between her family and teaching 3 days a week at the Santa Rosa school, finding fulfillment in both roles. Charlotte had thrived in her position as the ranch's bookkeeper, eventually taking on more responsibilities in the business side of operations. To everyone's surprise, including perhaps her own, she had recently become engaged to Matthew, Ethan's foreman, a steady man who valued her intelligence and spirit. Thomas O'Sullivan visited regularly, delighting in his grandchildren and the peaceful rhythm of ranch life. Though he still maintained the Willowcreek homestead, there was talk of him moving permanently to Santa Rosa now that both his daughters were settled there. As Hannah watched her husband lift their laughing son higher in the saddle, she felt a profound gratitude for the life they had built together. From the ashes of betrayal and misunderstanding had risen a love strong enough to weather any storm, a family bonded by truth and trust, and a future bright with possibilities. When Ethan looked up and caught her watching, his smile was as warm and genuine as it had been that first day in O'Malley's store. Some things changed with time, but the love between them only grew stronger, a love born when one man looked past accusation and saw the truth in a woman's heart.